University of Toronto professor and clinical psychologist Jordan Peterson needs to check his white male privilege. A white male in his mid-50s, he's objecting to the Trudeau government's Bill C-16, which aims to make harassment and discrimination based on gender identity and gender expression a crime in the Human Rights Act and Criminal Code. I'm triggered. This cisgender needs to check himself before he wrecks himself, or gets fired and put on a public show trial via the internet. Of course, I'm kidding about being triggered. Peterson is not suffering from some sort of epistemic handicap because of his white skin color. The white male privilege accusation against Peterson and others is racism, pure and simple. Although apparently you can't be racist against white people. Sure, you can discriminate against them, but racism implies a system of oppression and exploitation. And since white people are at the top, yes, their arguments are that stupid. Never mind that the real divide in society is between statist elitists with their army of bureaucrats versus the people who actually work in the private sector and create wealth. And definitely don't bring up the fact that this whole notion of white male privilege is a Marxist and Nazi argument. It's called polylogism. Non-racists and non-communists realize that the logical structure of the human mind is unchangeable and common throughout all human beings. Whether you're male, female, black or white, or if you worship God or worship the state. But the Marxists, unable to defend their system against the logic of human action that reveals the necessity of the markets, made the accusation that the bourgeois had a different mind than the proletariat, and therefore communism would work despite what all the economists and classical liberals were saying. Well, the Nazis picked up on the same argument too. They said that the Jews had a different mind than the Aryans and that they weren't really people. They claimed that every race had its own physics and economics and mathematics. And now the social justice warrior and the like have picked up on their version of the argument. Rather than flat out admitting that each race has its own logic, they argue in the negative, that some races are incapable of grasping certain mental capabilities, and therefore white people are incapable of identifying or seeing the plight of oppressed aboriginals, or the unfortunate situation many inner city black communities find themselves in. But no, people talking about white male privilege are the true progressives in society. So what does this have to do with U of T professor Jordan Peterson's objection of Trudeau's Bill C-16? Everything. I'd be surprised if this man still has a job in the next few years. He's uploaded parts of his lecture to YouTube with the hopes that it goes viral. I'll include a link in the description. Peterson claims that policing expression would create a situation similar to totalitarian and authoritarian political states. He says that there are no non-binary gender identities other than masculine and feminine because simply, I don't think there's any evidence for it. And when or if any evidence does become available, I'll consider changing my mind too. Peterson refuses to call students by their preferred pronouns. I don't recognize another person's right to determine what pronouns I use to address them. I won't do it. The pronoun issue is straightforward, he said. I won't mouth the words of ideologues, because when you do that, you become a puppet for their ideology. And ideology is all that this is. Because even if there were more than two genders, and even if all the social justice warriors were right, and polylogism is a real phenomenon, well, their own conclusions would invalidate their viewpoint. If each race or religion or nationality had a different logical construction of the mind, then we would have to conclude that there are no objectively true statements, but only ideological statements. But the SJW denies this. They think that their viewpoint is true, and everything they don't like is systemic oppression or built-in racial bias. But you can't have your cake and eat it too. If SJW logic is not ideology, but absolute logic, on what grounds is this assertion made? Because even transgender ethnic minorities must have a different logic than non-transgender ethnic minorities. And so who's to say who's right or wrong? Of course, the answer is that polylogism is a debunked and dangerous idea. Chemistry is chemistry for all human beings, and it's the same with physics and math. And so human logic is the same for all human beings, in all places, at all times. But in this environment, where the Trudeau government plans to sign polylogism into law, Peterson doesn't stand a chance. Even his fellow professors are attacking him. U of T physics professor A.W. Pete actually said that, quote, academic freedom was never intended to be used as a general purpose shield against professional accountability. If Peterson fears the Trudeau government passing Bill C-16 into law, he should smarten up his act by upgrading his ethics circuits, not to trying to marshal opposition to basic human rights protections for people he refuses to even try to understand. Talk about begging the question. Academic freedom was never intended to be used to question authority? So as the SJW would say, Peterson should just sit down and shut up instead of trying to make an argument. People wonder how Hitler came to power and how the Germans could have supported such a regime. Easy. They thought they were being scientific and progressive. And it's the same thing we're beginning to see here. Thanks for watching. Check the links in the description to watch Peterson's lecture and also to find out how you can donate or join us as a member here at Press for Truth. Stay tuned, we have more video reports coming soon. This is Dan Dix reporting for Press for Truth.
Well, I call it quantum superstate feminism. They exist sort of simultaneously as aggressor and victim. They're throwing shit over the wall, and then they cry foul when they get some back. It's the worst kind of cry bully, offense-taking grievance culture out there. These professional provocateurs who go out there, say outrageous things about other people, and then can't cope with the response. And even worse than that, appeal to authority to make the other person go away or to punish the other person.